My son-in-law wanted a clean line drawn between his family and mine. I gave him one. Then I opened the gray file cabinet in my back office, called my attorney, and took back every key he had never earned. He thought distance was free. He had never once checked the price. The first monsoon storm of the season had rolled through Palo Verde, Arizona, the night before, and the whole town smelled like wet creosote and hot pavement cooling down. Harlan Boyd loaded his truck the way he had every Saturday for 4 years. A canvas roll of tools behind the seat, a paper sack of tamales from the corner market, and a small tin of rosin for his granddaughter's violin case. Junie had a lesson at 10. Harlan had never missed one. He drove the 11 miles out to Cottonwood Lane with the windows down, rehearsing the joke he was going to tell her about the plumber and the parrot. He turned onto their street. He slowed. The blinds were gone from the front windows. Harlan sat in the driveway with the engine running and looked at the house he had helped paint 2 summers ago. The porch swing was gone. The little chalk hopscotch grid Junie had drawn on the walkway had been power washed away. A real estate sign stood in the gravel with a red banner stuck across it that said sold. He got out. He walked up and cupped his hands against the glass. Bare floors, a single paper cup left on the kitchen counter, nothing else. He stood there for a long moment, 66 years old, holding a bag of tamales that were going cold in his hand. Then he took out his phone and called his son-in-law. Devin picked up on the 4th ring, and his voice had that smooth, clipped efficiency he used with vendors he was about to underpay. Harlan. Hey. Bad time, actually. I'm standing in your driveway. There was a pause. Not an embarrassed pause. A calculating one. Right. Yeah. We closed Thursday. We're up in Prescott now, near my brother. It happened fast. A beat. Look, Marlene and I have been talking, and we think the family needs some room to breathe. Some space. So, the Saturday thing, the lessons, all that, we're going to hit pause on it. Harlan looked at the empty window. And the address? Honestly, I'd rather keep that between us and us, Devin said. No offense. It's just healthier. Harlan let the words settle. He did not raise his voice. He did not ask a single question about his granddaughter. Understood, he said. He hung up before Devin could say anything else. He set the tamales on the porch rail for whoever came next, got back in his truck, and drove home in silence. Harlan lived above his own shop on Mesquite Street, in a squat brick building that had once been a Santa Fe Railroad supply depot. He had bought it for almost nothing in 1994 and spent 30 years filling it with lathes, jeweler's benches, brass shavings, and the slow, layered ticking of 91 clocks in various stages of resurrection. He had been a locomotive machinist for 26 years before that. When the yard closed, he did not retire. He just got quieter about his work. He climbed the back stairs, hung his hat on the nail, and went to the gray file cabinet in the corner of his office. Devin Ashcroft had never been cruel. That was the trick of him. Cruelty would have been easy to name. Devin was polite. He was polite the way a locked door is polite. For 6 years, every invitation Harlan extended had been met with a reasonable-sounding wall. Sunday dinner conflicted with Devin's client walkthroughs. Christmas Eve conflicted with the Ashcroft side. Junie's spring recital had 2 tickets, and both were spoken for. Marlene always sent a text afterward. Dad, I'm so sorry, next time for sure. And Harlan always wrote back too. No trouble at all, and neither of them ever said the true thing out loud. He had decided long ago not to be the father-in-law who kept score in public, so he kept score in a drawer instead. He pulled out the first folder, the flatbed truck. Devin's irrigation and landscaping outfit ran on a 1-ton flatbed with a hydraulic lift, and when Devin's credit could not carry it in 2021, Harlan had co-signed and quietly covered the payment. $482 a month. Temporary, they had said. A bridge, the second folder, the family phone plan, 5 lines, on Harlan's account since Junie was 5. The third, violin lessons with Mrs. Ocampo, prepaid by the semester, because Junie had a real ear, and Devin had said music was a hobby they could not justify. And the fourth folder, the heavy one. The building itself, not this building, the other one, The metal warehouse on the north end of Mesquite Street with the fenced yard, where Devin parked his equipment, stored his sod pallets, and ran his entire business. Harlan owned it outright. Devin had been operating out of it rent-free for 5 years. Comparable space in Palo Verde ran $1,800 a month. Harlan spread the 4 folders across his workbench under the green lamp and looked at them the way he looked at a movement that would not keep time. A man who needs space does not need a landlord who never sends a bill. He uncapped his pen. The next Saturday, Harlan woke at 5:40, the way he always did, and then he did something he had not done in 4 years. He went back to sleep. When he finally got up at 8, he made coffee in the good pot instead of the travel mug, and he sat on the back landing, watching a roadrunner pick its way along the top of the fence. The desert after a storm is impossibly green for about 9 days, and he had spent 4 years of those 9-day windows driving 11 miles each way. At 9:15, his phone buzzed. Marlene, Dad, hope you're doing okay. 2 things. Junie left her spare bow in your shop. Could you overnight it? Also, Devin says the truck payment is set to draft Tuesday, and things are tight this month with the move, so if you could just keep it rolling till spring, that would save us. Harlan read it twice. There was no question in it about whether he was all right. There was no address either. Just a shipping request and a debit. He typed 1 line. The bow will be here whenever someone wants to come get it. He sent it. Then he put the phone face down on the step and finished his coffee while it was still hot, which he realized, with some surprise, he had not done in a very long time. At 10, he drove downtown to Palo Verde Federal and sat across from a loan officer named Teresa Nunez, whose father he had worked beside in the machine shop in 1988. He asked her to cancel 3 recurring drafts. She pulled them up, read them, and looked at him over her glasses without asking a single question, which was its own kind of kindness. "Effective when?" she said. "Today's fine." He was not angry. That was the strange part. He kept waiting for the anger, and it never arrived. What arrived instead was a sensation he could only compare to setting down a toolbox he had been carrying up a long flight of stairs and discovering that his shoulders had been up around his ears for years. He would have left it there. He truly would have. But on Monday, a certified letter came to the shop, forwarded from the county recorder's office, and it changed everything. Harlan opened it standing at the mailbox and read it 3 times before he went inside and sat down. It was a lien notice, 6 months old. It listed the Mesquite Street warehouse, his deed, his name, as collateral against a $41,000 equipment loan issued to Ashcroft Irrigation and Grounds LLC. Attached was a copy of a personal guarantee. At the bottom was a signature, Harlan J. Boyd. Harlan turned the page toward the lamp and stared at it for a long time. It was a decent forgery. Whoever did it had studied the loop on the H and gotten it nearly right. But Harlan had no middle initial. He had never had one. His mother had given him 1 name and 1 surname and told him that anything more was showing off, and in 66 years, he had never once signed a document as anything but Harlan Boyd. Devin had seen his signature on the co-sign paperwork. He had copied it. And then he had guessed at a middle initial to make it look more official. Harlan set the letter down very carefully, as though it might go off. Then he got up, walked out into the shop, and stood among the 91 ticking clocks until his hands stopped shaking. Rosalind Vega's office was above a dental practice on 4th Street, and she had been practicing law in Palo Verde for 31 years without ever once softening her voice for a client's comfort. She read the guarantee. She read the lien. She read the loan file Harlan had requested from the bank on Tuesday. Then she took off her glasses. "Harlan, I want to be clear with you about what you're holding. This is a felony, forgery, and probably fraudulent encumbrance on top of it. If you walk this down the street to the county attorney, your son-in-law does not keep his business, his license, or his freedom. Some of that could reach your daughter depending on what she signed." The office was quiet. Somewhere below them, a drill whined. Harlan looked at his hands, machinist's hands, scarred across the knuckles, still steady. "I don't want him in a cell," he said. Rosalind waited. "I want my name off that paper," Harlan said. "I want him off my property." I want every dollar of mine that's still flowing toward that house shut off at the valve, and then I want to be done." He looked up. "I'm not going to burn his life down. Not because he deserves better, because I'd have to live inside a man who did that, and I've worked too hard on the one I've got." Rosalind put her glasses back on. "That," she said, "is the most expensive mercy I've ever been asked to draft." They worked through the afternoon. She filed a sworn affidavit of forged signature with the recorder and sent notice to the lender. She drafted a 30-day notice to vacate the Mesquite Street warehouse, citing unauthorized encumbrance of the premises. She prepared a formal withdrawal of Harlan's co-signature on the truck lease, transferring the obligation entirely to the borrower. Harlan signed each one in slow, plain script, no middle initial. "They'll say you ambushed them," Rosalind said, capping her pen. "They'll say a lot of things," Harlan said. "Not one of them will be a lie," I told. The lender moved faster than anyone expected. A forged guarantee means an unsecured loan, and an unsecured loan means a bank that wants its money by Friday. Devin's line of credit froze on a Wednesday afternoon. His equipment financing collapsed on a Thursday. He arrived at the shop on Mesquite Street on Friday evening, and he did not knock. Harlan was at the bench with a loop in his eye, cleaning the escapement of a 1912 Seth Thomas, when the door banged open hard enough to set 3 pendulums swinging out of phase. "What did you do?" Devin's face was blotched red. His polo shirt sweated through at the collar. "Do you have any idea what you just did to me? The bank pulled everything. Everything. I've got a crew of 6 and no equipment line and a notice on my yard. Sit down, Devin. I'm not going to. Sit down." Something in the flatness of it did what shouting never could. Devin sat on the shop stool by the door. Harlan took the loop out of his eye, set it on the felt, and slid the certified letter across the bench. Devin looked at it. His face went through several things very quickly. Harlan watched every one of them. "That's not what it looks like," Devin said. "It looks like my building on a loan I never heard of." Harlan tapped the signature line. "There's your problem, though. You gave me a middle initial. I don't have one. 66 years, and not one letter in between." The silence went on so long the clocks filled it. "I was going to tell you," Devin said finally, and his voice had lost all its polish. "It was supposed to be 6 months. The Tucson contract fell through, and I had payroll and I couldn't— Harlan, I couldn't come to you again. You'd already done the truck. I couldn't sit in your kitchen and ask for more." "So you didn't ask. You'd have said yes." "I might have," Harlan said. "That was mine to decide. You took the deciding away from me and left me the risk. That's not borrowing. There's another word for it, and you know it, because you spent 6 months hoping I'd never open my mail." Devin's jaw worked. "So that's what this is. The house, the space, all of it. You're punishing us." Harlan leaned back against the bench and folded his arms. "Son, I want you to hear this carefully, because I'm only going to say it once. You told me you wanted space. I gave you space. Every inch of it. What you actually wanted was distance from me and closeness to my money, and you never once considered that those two things arrive in the same truck." He nodded toward the door. "You sold the house I helped you paint, and you didn't tell me. You moved my granddaughter 3 hours away, and you wouldn't give me a street name. And in the same week, you asked me to keep paying for a vehicle parked at an address I'm not allowed to know." "Marlene didn't know about the loan," Devin said quickly. "She had nothing to do with it." Harlan looked at him. "That'll be between her and me." Devin stood up. He looked around the shop, at the brass, the lathes, the 91 clocks, the whole quiet inheritance of a man who had built something slowly, and Harlan saw the exact moment he understood that none of it had ever been guaranteed to him. "She thinks you'll come around," Devin said at the door. "Marlene. She says you always do." "Tell her I've stopped doing the thing I always do," Harlan said, and turned back to his bench. Marlene came 8 days later. She came alone, in the middle of a Tuesday, and she stood in the doorway of the shop, the way she used to stand in the doorway of the garage when she was 9 and had broken something. Harlan made coffee. They sat on the 2 stools by the window, and neither of them touched it. "Devin says you didn't know," Harlan said. Marlene looked at the floor for a long time. "I witnessed it, Dad." The clocks ticked. He put the papers in front of me and said you'd already agreed, and it was just a formality, and her voice broke apart. I signed under it as a witness. I knew you hadn't agreed. I knew. And I told myself that if I didn't look too hard at it, then it wasn't really happening. We were $9,000 behind on everything. Junie needed braces. I was so tired, Dad. I was so tired of being tired. Harlan sat with that. It hurt in a place the whole rest of it had not reached. You could have called me. I was ashamed. I'd have taken shame, he said. Shame I know what to do with. What I can't do anything with is a forged name on a bank's paper and a granddaughter I'm not allowed to have an address for. Marlene wiped her face with the heel of her hand. That was him, the address. I fought him on it. I lost. She looked up. Are you going to press it? No. Why not? Because you're my daughter, Harlan said, and because that's my choice to make, and nobody's going to take the deciding away from me twice. He set his cup down. But I want you to understand what no means here, Marlene. It doesn't mean things go back. The money is done. All of it. The truck, the phones, the yard, the checks that showed up whenever the basement flooded or the transmission went. Done. Permanently. You two are going to find out what your life actually costs, and I am not going to stand behind you like a wall you never have to look at. She nodded slowly. She did not argue. Somehow that made it worse and better at once. 2 weeks later, Harlan sat in Rosalind Vega's office and rewrote his estate. He removed Devin as a contingent beneficiary. He removed Marlene as executor and replaced her with the trust department at Palo Verde Federal. And then, he did the thing he had been thinking about since the day he stood in an empty driveway holding cold tamales. He established an irrevocable trust for Junie Ray Ashcroft, age 9, funded with the proceeds he would have left to her parents, locked behind a neutral corporate trustee, disbursed only for tuition, instruments, lessons, and medical care, directly to the providers, never to a household account. Not $1 of it could be borrowed against, leveraged, redirected, or touched by anyone whose signature could be practiced. She'll be able to go anywhere, Rosalind said, stamping the last page, and nobody can spend it on her behalf. That's the whole idea, Harlan said. He signed. Plain script. No middle initial. Then he drove home, and on the way he stopped at Mrs. Ocampo's studio and prepaid Junie's lessons through the following June, and asked her not to mention who had done it. Palo Verde's old rail depot clock had not run since 1979. Harlan had walked past it for 40 years. In October, the historical committee put out a call for anyone with mechanical experience, and a man named Sam Reyes tracked Harlan down at the shop and asked, more or less, whether he was going to keep pretending he had better things to do. He did not have better things to do. Not anymore. Tuesday and Thursday nights, Harlan climbed a ladder into a dusty brick tower with Sam, a retired schoolteacher named Inés Duarte, who could read a 100-year-old maintenance log like scripture, and a 17-year-old named Ruben, who kept asking questions Harlan actually had to think about before answering. They cleaned 4 decades of pigeon leavings off a Seth Thomas No. 15 tower movement. They machined 2 replacement pinions on Harlan's own lathe. Inés brought coffee in a thermos and stories about the town that nobody had bothered to write down. Harlan taught Ruben how to feel a pivot for wear with a fingernail. He taught him that a clock does not measure time, it keeps it, that the whole art is in giving back exactly what you were given, no more and no less, over and over, without cheating. Some nights he came home at 11, with brass dust in his eyebrows and his back aching, and slept better than he had in 6 years. Devin called once more, in November, to ask whether Harlan might reconsider the warehouse, at a discount, month to month. Harlan said no, kindly and without a speech, and then he wished him a good winter and meant it, which surprised them both. He heard through Marlene that Devin had shrunk the crew to 3 and taken a maintenance contract with the school district, that Marlene had gone back to bookkeeping part-time, that they were living in a rental with a shared driveway, and had, for the first time in their marriage, a written budget. Harlan felt neither triumph nor pity, just the clean, cool distance of 2 households finally paying their own way. On the first Saturday in December, Palo Verde held its holiday lighting in the square, and the whole town came out in coats they only needed 9 days a year. At 6 o'clock, Ruben threw the switch in the tower. The depot clock struck the hour for the first time in 47 years, and the sound rolled out over the square. 6 deep, patient strokes, and people who had not thought about that clock in decades stopped talking and looked up. Ines squeezed Harlan's arm. Sam whooped like a much younger man. Somebody's grandmother started crying near the tamale stand. Harlan stood with his hands in his coat pockets and let it wash over him. Later that night, back at the shop, he found an envelope that had been pushed under the front door. Inside was a sheet of school paper. On it, in careful 9-year-old pencil, was a drawing of a tower with a clock in it and a very small stick figure at the top with white hair. Underneath it said, "Mrs. Ocampo says I'm doing Vivaldi in the spring. Mom says you fixed the town clock. Love, Junie." No address. Not yet. Harlan pinned it to the wall above his bench, where he would see it every day. Then he wound the 8-day regulator by the window, listened to 91 clocks come into their own rhythm around him, and turned off the lamp. He was not waiting for an apology. He was not waiting for a phone call. He had stopped waiting for people to decide he was worth including. He had a tower that struck the hour, a granddaughter with a Loctite future, and a house that belonged, finally and entirely, to the man who paid for it. Outside, the desert cold came down clean and quiet over Mesquite Street, and Harlan Boyd slept like a man whose time was his own.